All right, we are here with the great Mike Mitchell. Mike, welcome to the program. We're done. We finished. We made it through a year. What do you think?
It's great. It's a great feeling. As someone who lived the XFL back in 2001, which seems like another planet,
Yeah.
um, it's great. It's great to see the XFL get to the finish line. It was a fun season, and it went by so fast, which is often the case with these leagues. And I'm looking forward to phase two
So,
for the XFL. Should be fun.
so what did you think of the championship game? Were you surprised Arlington was able to pull out? I mean, and basically dominate DC the whole game.
Yeah, I wasn't too surprised. Anthony Miller and I did a joint preview article where I
Hmm.
wrote a description about the game and all that. And two things stood out to me. Not only, the way Arlington was playing towards the end of the season, how much they improved, but, Luis Perez facing DC for a fourth time was a huge factor. He only started 8 games during the season. Half of them were against Greg Williams.
Oh, there you go.
And twice with the Vipers, and then obviously twice with the Renegades. And he had success against them the last time. We threw for over 335 yards, nearly beat the Defenders for their first ever loss at Audi Field. Obviously, that game went in overtime, and DC was able to hang on. And the thing with the Defenders is that from mid-season point on, they gave up a lot of passing yards. We know Quentin Dormady had a huge game with the 6 touchdowns, over 300 yards, but even Jack Cohn threw for over 300 yards. San Antonio nearly beat DC. Parker Romo, who's now with the Detroit Lions, misses that 53-yard field goal after
Hmm.
getting iced. And Perez threw, like I mentioned, threw for over 335 yards against DC's defense. So they won that chess match. Credit to Jonathan Hayes and Luis Perez. They had 2 weeks to prepare for the game. They were fully prepared for Williams' blitzes. They had the answer. They had answers, and so they were balanced enough where they ran the ball enough and were successful with that. Where they kept DC's defense honest, and I thought DC would win by 1 point. Turns out they didn't win at all, and I
Hmm.
had the game. I had the game 32-31. Ended up, however, it ended up 9 point victory for the Renegades. Plenty of points in the game, 62 points in total. So I knew it would be a high scoring game. Um, and I had a feeling Arlington, because we already saw it in DC that they were going to be up for the challenge. Little did I know how perfect it would be. It took almost until the fourth quarter for them to punt the football. So
Hmm.
they so that was a great. And then, before the season, when I was on your show, and in articles I've written, and at mid-season we even talked about it. I was very bullish on the Arlington Renegades because of their coaching staff, not just Bob Stoops, but all the experience they have on their staff. You got Jonathan Himbaugh, just won. He's now a two-time XFL champion. He just won the XFL title as offensive line coach, special teams coach with the Arlington Renegades. It's great to see him back in the XFL and winning it all. And then when you look at that staff, Jonathan Hayes, Jay Hayes, Tim Lewis, Scott Spurrier. A lot of these guys have a lot of experience in these leagues, a lot of experience in the NFL, and it showed. Bob Stoops and that staff did a very good job. So before the year, I knew their defense was going to be very good. I knew their special teams was going to be very good. I expected Kyle Sloter to play at a high level. He did not, and that's
Yeah.
really what hindered Arlington all season long. Was they weren't getting very good quarterback play, whether it be Drew Plitt or Sloter. And Luis Perez stabilized the Renegades, made them a legitimate threat. And it's just funny, they finished the year 6-6. But I think it's poetic that in a league that's like where we have players that are left for dead, dismissed, forgotten, where people ignore the XFL itself, that the champion of the league is a team that was dismissed, left for dead, forgotten in the Arlington Renegades. Some people thought they shouldn't even be in the playoffs, and because of their record, regular season record. And then when the smoke cleared on the season, they were the champions. So, and you can't. It's hard not to be happy for Luis Perez.
Oh, yeah.
The spring king, spring pro football king. He's just, he's an easy person to root for. He's gotten progressively better in every league that he's been in. We saw that in, AF. He struggled a little bit, had some moments. XFL 2020, he was leading the Guardians. They were tied for first place when COVID and all that stuff happened. He played well in the spring league, played well in the USFL, and then here he is, a champion. Well deserved for him. I'm happy for him.
Yeah, that was my thing too going in. I was like, hey, but I'd be cool if Bob Stoops, Luis Perez win it too, and Jonathan Hayes, Jay Hayes, and the whole crew over there. for the Arlington Renegades. So now the league is over, and it's so funny now that we can, like you were saying, we can be able to. Oh, I hope this guy's coming back. I mean, and what's going to happen during the offseason? How are these teams going to improve? This is a new era for us at XFL News Hub. So before, and we'll definitely do that stuff later on, and as the season progresses, but as the off season progresses. So I wanted to get your take on three things you liked this season when it comes to the XFL, and then we'll get into three things you dislike about the XFL, and we'll try to make that complimentary sandwich or whatever it's called. So give me like what are three things that come to mind that you kind of really like that you thought that the XFL did well this year?
Well, football, first off, the football is very
Mhm.
good. So the quality of the play, I'm not surprised by that. The league has very good directors of player personnel. We saw what Randy Mueller, Von Hutchins, and others did. Their football staff, Mark Ross, Doug Whaley, Rashil, they did a lot of hard work behind the scenes to bring quality players into the league. So I thought the football play itself is something that because you never know with a new league, new teams, you never know how things are going to work out on that front, and it takes time. You got basically 8 expansion pro football teams working together for the first time. It takes time for that to gel. I thought the football was very good. Another thing I loved was the energy from the stadiums and the crowds. Now, we're not surprised about DC and St. Louis because that's some of the best things. In many ways, the XFL seemed like a new league in many aspects and how they operated and how they ran things. And it felt like they were getting their feet wet. Redbird has never owned a league like this before. And the same thing with Danny and The Rock.
Mm-hmm.
And but what two of the things that really were great for the league was they inherited, they picked up right where they left off in St. Louis. We saw how great those crowds were. And they picked up right where they left off in DC. And so, and even in the crowds where, even where the attendance wasn't so great, the Guardians games or Vegas games, I thought the energy of the crowd was great. Because a lot of times with these leagues, what you get is casual fans that show up. They either got the tickets from a friend or something, and they're not really into the game. So I thought the energy at all the stadiums was great. So I thought it stands out with St. Louis and DC. Those crowds were above and beyond everybody else.
Oh, it
You
was
can't
fun.
imagine. Yeah, that Defenders atmosphere is something else, right?
Hey, even in the
So
championship game, I'm hanging out with everybody. I mean, we were saying, even my wife said too, we had more fun the pre-game hanging out with all the DC Defenders fans than we did at the actual game, even if our team did win. You know what I mean? We still had,
right.
it was
And that was
just
the great thing about
energy.
that was the great thing about the championship game. You had 22,000 fans at the game, and what we saw fans from every team in the league at the game. We
Yeah.
saw Brahmas fans, we saw Defenders fans, saw Battlehawks fans, obviously Renegades fans.
Guardians,
So
our man
Dragons,
Jarrett, he was there.
Guardians. Yeah, so that was really cool. That was like that is like one of the positives of the league. Like, when you watch the games, you feel the energy from the crowd. They're into it. They care about their teams. I think the passion it showed, and you can't match St. Louis and DC. I mean, that rivals, just from what I've seen in sports, that rivals a lot of, like, for a first year league, even though this is 3.0. For them to have those kind of crowds and that kind of energy, and I think the XFL was surprised by it. We published an article at XFLNewsHub.com. You did, going over The Rock and Danny Garcia's GQ interview. And what I found interesting about that, and maybe this is, I don't want to veer off into the negative side yet,
Mhm.
was that The Rock said he was unaware of the beer snake. So, like, if you want to say that's not really a positive here, but the reason why I bring that up is, like, they found out real quickly what the beer snake was, how awesome it was, how popular it was, and then that first week, that led into lemons.
Yes. And there was
Because
lemons thrown in the championship game. We knew that was happening too.
so the lemons were a new addition because to from 2020. Because why? Because the league didn't realize the strength and the greatness of the beer snake, how much how it's such a huge part of DC. DC only had whatever it was 3 home games in 2020. They
Mhm.
already established that. So when Dwayne Johnson admitted that he didn't realize about the beer snake, it was kind of a little bit telling to me. It tells me, like, maybe not too much market research done on the very league you guys purchased. But anyway, that's more of a negative. But my first 2 positives there, I would say, is the football, and then the the crowds, the energy from each game, the devoted fans, that makes a big difference. Like if you were like, I saw a lot of people who were casuals that went to the North Championship game for DC, and they said they never had an experience like that. They've been to so many sporting events, they never had an experience. They definitely want to come back. So that's a hot ticket, and it's fun. And so those two things were the two best things. As far as the third thing, it was, I think the third positive for me was, it goes beyond saying finishing the year, right? We didn't have any alien invasion. We didn't have any
Yeah.
virus or anything like that. Finish it off. So it goes without saying. I think the third positive to me is just simply the opportunities that were given to players. This happens in these leagues because, when you see guys like Hakeem Butler, who's DMing Anthony Beck, talented guy from Iowa State, you see him, DMing Anthony Beck to get a shot into the league, and then him being a major star is awesome. Signed with the Steelers, obviously. You see Josh Gordon come in the league. Sometimes you get these veteran players that come in and they got boo-boo face. They're not happy to be in the position they're in life. They're not really giving it their all. They're upset. They go through the motions, just collect a payday. And to see these guys come in and play with such heart and desire, A.J. McCarron, who I thought was the best quarterback in the league. I know the league voted differently on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Disagree. Numbers say otherwise. But I thought AJ was terrific too. Another guy in his 30s. That's the great thing. The majority of these leagues have 23, 24, 25-year-old guys who are college superstars that are still trying to find their way on the pro level. So the leagues like the XFL are great for them. But it's also great for like that TJ Barnes, right? He's played in the XFL in 2020, been out of it, ready to retire, finds out about the XFL returning, loses 75 pounds, comes back, and he just retired, and he's going out a champion. So he got a chance. That to me is like one of the positives to me is not just the young guys that got opportunities to play. Abram Smith, fifth leading rusher in the entire nation in 2021. He comes into the XFL as a rookie, and he's a major star. He gets an opportunity to show that he can handle the load and be a superstar. And, and just the opportunities the league provided overall. The Von Hutchins of the world coming in first time as, they call it a DPV, but it's GM. Watching him put together a great roster that catered to his coaches and what Reggie Barlow did, Fred Keiss. The opportunities are provided for players, coaches, everyone. Our guy, Jay Noakes.
I actually got to say hello to Jay on the sideline, so that was very cool.
That's
during
tremendous.
the game. Yep.
That's what these leagues are about. Is like, there's so many young professionals, and it goes beyond players, coaches, assistants, trainers, everybody that's involved in the league, and whatever. You got 800 some odd employees thereabouts for the XFL. It goes beyond that. So I think the opportunity, I think quality for the positives for me, quality of play, the crowds, and watching these opportunities and dreams come true for young players and players that have been around the block who got to put their own, got to end their own chapters and got to revitalize themselves. There are so many cool stories that are involved with all that, all those people. And I think those are three major positives for the XFL in 2023.
Yeah, I'm with you with the football and the game day experience with the XFL. I will say from the beginning of the season for the first game, at least in DC, and as it grew, as each week going, like it got better and better. There was more stuff. There was more commercials. There was more. So I'm really excited to see what they do in 2024 to actually have a full year of planning, because a lot of these people came in like a month before the season started. The other one I would throw out there too as a positive for me was the broadcast. I mean, Dean Blandino being able to explain the rules like that. I thought that was a big, huge hit, for the league also. So I would throw that in there as well. So give me your three negatives from the 2023 season. I already got my list.
Right. I'm thinking about this on the fly here.
Yep.
One of the things I mentioned as I was going through the positives was, one of the negatives to me was the league not quite being aware of certain things, from 2020, trying to carry that over. Now you have a whole bunch of new people in the league, that weren't a part of 2020. And I get it. And there's some people that are, that are on board that were a part of 2020. I think just not knowing things like not knowing about the beer snake,
Yeah.
Things about, stuff like that. Like, they were in hibernation for a while, the XFL. They had plenty of time to do research and to have an understanding of that. I don't think the league, my main thing, and, it's difficult because some of the things you see as negatives, you don't know. Like, for example, one of the negatives to me was the lack of promotion and some of the execution on social media. And so that's tough for me to say because I understand that sometimes the social media is understaffing, but I don't think the league was as good as it was in 2020. The one of the negatives that this league, one of the tough things that this league had, it was they had to measure up certain aspects to the XFL 3 years ago. This wasn't just a new league that came out of the blue. Then you might be a little more kinder to them, grade them on a different curve. I didn't think the social media. There's a lot of good people in social media. We mentioned Jay Noakes, Liam Musgrave did a tremendous job. Haley Lynch, a lot of other guys, a lot of other people involved in the league. But I don't think the league did a very good job of keeping things updated on social media, promoting the league enough. And I know some of that is financial and part of strategy in terms of not spending as much money. I don't think the league did a very good job of communicating and promoting as much as they should have, either on social media or through other avenues. The social media part is a little bit easier because injury reports should not be up to XFLNewsHub.com writers and whomever out there to be put out. The team's social media sites should be putting that out. As far as tweeting out transactions, tweeting out this. So they tried during game day. There was a lack of presence. Even the XFL Championship game, it took over an hour and change for a new tweet to come on board at XFL. And even just retweeting things, NFL on ESPN, and ESPN itself was tweeting out videos and highlights. I think that needed to be more current, fresh. I think the promotion was lacking in a lot of aspects. You can't blame the league too much because they weren't in specific markets, but there certainly would have been better ticket sales if they were. There's the trade-off there, whether or not you want to spend money on not only promotion and marketing within local markets, but also having your players in there. So I know that the hub was a success in terms of financially and in terms of the league streamlining everything into that one area. But I do think there are certain aspects of their promotion. Promotion would be one, I would say, as far as a negative to me. I don't think there was, just waiting for The Rock to tweet about games and all that is not enough. So the second part of it is as far as a negative, because there's several. I think also, and it kind of ties into part one, is I don't think the league did a very good job in terms of merchandising. And, the jerseys came out very late and they were overpriced.
And they sucked. That's my number one, was you had a whole year to figure this out. And I know I saw them up close and my friends bought them. People in that not only, that I know the league, everybody returned them. I did see a couple of people wear them at the game, but it wasn't what it was on the site.
To me, that's a major miss because not only is selling the jerseys and merchandise important, but like for promoting, and you want to do that way before the season starts. The XFL, not only did they do it extremely late in the season, but then they priced them through the roof. And then, as you're mentioning there, the quality aspects. And, and that was the thing, like with Battlehawks and the Defenders, a lot of the fans had their old merch. And they're wearing their old merch. And I think it's a missed opportunity not only to sell merchandise, it's kind of a way of promoting your league locally too. It's like, guys and gals all around the city wearing Defenders gear before the season even starts. Defenders hat, and obviously you want to make money. So the more merchandise you sell, better. People want to buy these things. There are fans out there that want to buy the hats. They want to buy all the jerseys. They didn't even make that accessible. And then they dropped the ball when they released it. The people within the league don't like this, but you never would have seen this with Vince McMahon. Who's a master, whatever people think of him. Master marketing and promoting, has proven that his whole life. Merchandising, branding, that's a given, right? So I don't think, and then we saw in the XFL, not the XFL in 2020 was perfect with this either, but the moment you announce your uniforms and your logos and all that, you need to be ready to go. And they weren't ready to go. And then when they did deliver, They didn't do a very good job of it. Now, it's one thing if this was, no disrespect to many of the, fashion lines out there. One thing if these, this is a generic brand and it's a little hard with all this. Under Armour is a big deal.
Yeah.
So you would figure that with Under Armour, the relationship with The Rock and Dwayne Johnson, direct partnership there, that the XFL would have done a better job. And then I've heard Russ Brandon in interviews talk about, and Kevin Seifert talked about this as well, that Russ Brandon went out there and said, one of the great things about the XFL in 2023 that makes them different is they have all these great new jerseys and uniforms and logos, and they're tremendous. And I'm not saying they weren't, the logos and the colors and all that is fine, but they didn't do a very good job for, if you're touting that, you didn't sell your stuff. Then when you did sell it, it wasn't of high quality. And then when you did sell it, it was priced through the roof where no one can buy it.
Yeah.
People can, you better have top quality, top notch if you're going to sell a jersey for if you expect people to put down mortgage payments for a jersey, it better be good.
Pay for your car payment.
Yeah, exactly. Or car payment, exactly. So I mean that would be a negative there. So lack of promotion, or you don't even have to spend that much money there. And then I think they're missing the boat on merchandising, which is revenue.
Yeah.
Easy revenue. And so and there's a want there, So I think those two things. The third thing, now this is difficult. I really have to scramble my brain here to think, because those two first things really cover a lot of ground.
Yeah.
I
got a couple. You want me to give you mine so you can think about it?
I think the league, from an incident thing, I'm gonna shoot it to you from I don't think the league handled, but this isn't that big of a thing, but I don't think the league handled the end of the season very well in terms of explaining their tiebreakers. So I know here we are. The Renegades are champions. They wouldn't be champions if it wasn't for, I guess the Battlehawks not making the playoffs, right? With a 7-3 record. So I know a lot of people see that as a negative. I was for a long time during the season writing articles. I wanted the top two division teams. Yes, no matter what your record is, you win your division, you get in the playoffs. I wanted the next two best teams. I like the idea of divisions. One of the two next best teams to make.
Which is something they've talked about. I heard Dean Blandino some point, or somebody mentioned that might be something they would look into for season 2.
But I think the league didn't do a very good job, and there are people out there that did do a good job at the end of the year and worked very hard, myself included, to explain something that was very complicated to understand. And I think they went into even the Sunday night game. I think that was confusing for the audience. They went into the Sunday night game saying Seattle needs to score 35.
That's what I thought too.
And that wasn't the case. So they just needed to make sure that the Vipers didn't score more than 27. So there were things like that where I think everyone within the league was confused. And tiebreakers are tough in an 8-team league, because there's a chance, like we saw Seattle and St. Louis, they split during the season, they had the same divisional record. So there's a chance that you're going to go to tiebreaker number 3, 4, 5, etc. And so I thought they did a bad job of handling that at the end of the year. Miscommunication. They were saying on air that St. Louis is in if they beat Orlando. And, the week prior after Seattle beat St. Louis in St. Louis. So I think the league didn't do a very good job of explaining that away and kind of getting on the same page there. So I don't know if that's my number 3, but I'm anxious to hear yours, Mark, what your negatives are.
So mine was the jersey / the jersey we covered. I thought the website wasn't that great. The data that was on there, I don't know, it was just kind of a weird site. I don't know if it was because of my browser, but it was just kind of, I thought maybe the last year's website was better. There was a lot more data. I don't know. I was kind of wonky about but when it comes to the data, this kind of correlates to, and something that I was told by multiple betting people that would reach out to XFL News Hub and was like, if you want people to tune into your games, you got to make sure that your betting game is on point. And it was not. You go to DraftKings, you click on the stats. It doesn't give you a full list of all the player data. You know what I mean? And then, so the DraftKings wasn't that great. There was no, and I don't know what they have to do, gambling license or I don't know that part, but there was just the over under, this point spread, and then, who's going to win the game. That's all you could bet on. Like there wasn't like any in game. Oh, AJ McCarron's going to throw for 3.5 touchdowns. You're going to take the over, the under. None of that was existed. So that was to me. I don't know if that was a data issue or there's licensing issues, like gambling, whatever issues. But so I that kind of took away from people being interested in the league because you want to drive interest. Fantasy football and betting are a huge thing.
Yeah,
So
transparency, communication, that's part of promotion and information. That's huge. I know on the XFL app they had the parlay thing where every week you could pick, how many yards McCann could throw for over under,
well, what do you
how
get for
many.
doing that? I would always forget doing that.
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of people would forget to do it. It wasn't promoted enough,
Yeah.
and it wasn't so, like a lot of things, it goes back to promotion. The injury reports, transactions, practice reports, those are easy things. They don't cost much money to do. Every team should be doing that. And then of course you have to have the information on your site, like you were mentioning, the data points to back it up. You have to have access to data that helps with that. But like there wasn't. It should be daily. It should be. This is today's Dragons practice report. Here's who's questionable. Here's who's
And that's for the
probable.
gamblers. You want the gamblers
That,
who are going to watch your game. They're the ones that need it. And you're right. It's a free, easy thing.
it's a free, easy thing because even you got independently people doing it, posting the daily. We get it. Thankfully, there's a lot of great PR people who work within the league that would forward
Mm.
that information to us, and we would put it in our articles and tweets and everything else.
Yeah.
But they need to do that. They need to do that. I'm not trying to disrespect myself, Mike Mitchell. But they need to do that from a league standpoint. Whatever, I've got 8,000 followers or whatever the hell. That's nothing. They need that as a league. Each team, it's not hard. You release a player, you sign a player, post it.
Yeah.
Just post it. This guy player was released. This guy, the point spreads, all this stuff. They didn't lean. These leagues have had an issue leaning into gambling and fantasy. They talk a good game. I think the XFL dropped the ball on some of this stuff that I mentioned. It's like you could have made more money through merchandising. You could have made more money through gambling. You could have generated more interest in your league if you'd done that. You could have generated more interest if you promote. So, but those things I'm mentioning, they don't cost very much to do. And I think that's where they dropped the ball. I talked to people within the league, and I was like, one person who doesn't control any of the web stuff and said, really, we're not posting transactions yet? I'm going to have to go talk to somebody. It took them forever just to put transactions on the site. When you click on the league and see, it took them forever. Now they have them, and we got people out there like XFL analysts and others that would wait every night until 9 p.m. They know exactly what time transactions are posted, or they would just look at the roster and see who's missing, who's been added, and then post that. It shouldn't come to that. Good job by analysts. Great job. But it shouldn't. That's great. He's providing information for fans who want it. But it shouldn't come to that. The league should have that readily available. It's on their site, And so I think the XFL, unfortunately, they missed the boat. And Redbird's all about capital, right? About creating revenue streams, making money. They missed. They dropped the ball in areas where they could have made money.
Yeah. And my last one, and then we'll get into positives. Was the Vegas. So I thought so. And I wrote an article on XFL News Hub where I was kind of like, maybe the reason why we're in XFL is in Vegas because they know something is going to go on with the MLS team getting a stadium in Vegas, and then they could play in the Vegas MLS stadium, and then we're all good to go. And we just kind of knew. Now, of course, it came out that San Diego paid $500 million or something like that to get a team in, an MLS team there, which then kind of made the whole decision to go to Vegas even worse because it was like, even if you were playing in a crappy stadium in San Diego, MLS was coming. Now, maybe they didn't, who knows, but that whole like Vegas thing, because it delayed the schedule for coming out, which delayed the teams being able to sell tickets and season tickets and all this other kind of stuff. And then the presentation of what the Vegas stadium looked like on television. I mean, especially with the first game. And then you've got like, Joe's construction unit that built their little, I was like, oh, please don't get hit by lightning and please don't have that thing fall down. Like I was worried about the people that were in it. I'm sure it was constructed fine and whatever. But I think that, and the lighting was kind of wonky at that stadium. So I'm hopeful. I'm cautiously optimistic because we talk whatever. And I'm not here to, XFL News Hub, like our ethos is not to like bag on these leagues. Our goal is to get people to watch them. But if we're gonna do one time a year where we're gonna be like really kind of thing, would be the Vegas kind of San Diego thing, because it all ties in with the schedule getting roll out. And I mean, have you heard anything about like Vegas? I mean, where are they going to play in 3 years? But I know that there was people within Redbird that they wanted to have Vegas, and you got the money, you're the money bags, so you can play wherever you want. You want to play in Omaha, go right ahead. You want to play in a high school gym in Omaha or something like that, and you were the one with the money. Hey, I ain't saying nothing, but I mean, what's your take on the Vegas?
I've heard there's been, even during the season, there have been internal discussions about the XFL leaving Vegas.
Oh,
I think, yeah, I think that they're going to stick it out for another year. You know, all things considered, I know people were mocking it. All things considered, I thought they drew okay considering the circumstances,
I
right?
mean,
They
ten
legit,
thousand
yeah,
people and it could 6,000.
right. I thought they did, considering how late they were to market, considering, all the other elements that were involved that were working against them. I thought they did okay, but, okay shouldn't have been, I hate to put it this way because they bought the league out of bankruptcy in 2020, right? In the summer of 2020. And I know there's a lot of planning and stalling and the CFL stuff and all that. They had plenty of time to decide on markets. And I understand why they chose Vegas. You look at it, although the league doesn't seem to be that interested in hitting on gambling, but there's the sexiness, the cachet of Vegas itself. But they did a bad job because they didn't think it through, and then they ended up in a situation. They tried to make it work at Cashman. I'm not like hating on people over there
Hmm.
at that facility. They accommodated the XO. I mean, they tried as best as they could to accommodate it. Yeah, but it could have had its own appeal to it. And the team wasn't very good. They were competitive, but they didn't win very much. And so,
Great logo. I love the
um,
logo. Love the uniform, the Vipers, everything.
it, yeah, I on paper, I'm sure the whole thing sounded sexy to them, and that they would build upon it. And I'm not saying that in year two they can't do a better job. They have a lot of work in front of them. If they get a nice 10,000 fans for every game, and it's a fun, like charming atmosphere for the games, maybe it can work out. But it's a little bit of an. I mean, the league is already talking about potential expansion down the road in year three. I know some people were hoping that maybe like Vegas would be one of the teams that would be moved. Um, I think they're going to give it another go. They're going to get another chance with it. They have a 2-year lease there. That's not to say they couldn't they couldn't have broken it and just moved on and made a financial payment, take the L there.
Yeah, here's
But I
50
think they're going to
bucks.
kind of,
That's the
yeah,
penalty for
here's
us leaving Cashman. Here's 50 bucks.
so it was for they had their, they dropped the ball. They dropped the ball on that one. The XFL did with Vegas. I like it. I like the brand, like the name. A lot of good players on that team. I get what they were thinking, but they could have chosen better markets that would have been more interested in this type of league. You mentioned San Diego, even if it was like a Columbus, Ohio, or whatever.
Yeah.
It would have been like, just like because Vegas is in the North division.
Mm.
So there's definitely definitely that was a black mark on the league. The whole Vegas situation. It didn't pan out. And like I said, I don't blame anybody who works for the team. I don't blame even the
Yeah.
ticket office. I thought they did a decent. All things considered, it could have been a disaster. They could have had like 20 people in the stands every game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the fact that they got 6,000 people to come out watch the games is awesome. Good. I think that was a pretty decent accomplishment considering how late they were even selling tickets. So, and like you said, Vegas had a trickle down effect of the rest of the league because it held up everybody else. So, so that was good, very good. So hopefully, lessons learned. You take all the negatives and all the things you messed up on in year one, which is bound to happen with any new. It's not easy operating a new pro sports league, let alone a football one. And so hopefully they're able to do a better job in year two with some of these aspects they missed on in year one.
Yeah. And definitely ban the guy who was with like a cowbell or something like that was on the game. He was not allowed to be in that stadium. And then at one point, one of the games was driving me nuts. They had a DJ playing music like while that team was playing. I was like, so But yeah,
They were
I think,
trying very hard. It was
yeah,
a lot of there was they were trying very hard to spruce it up any way they could.
yeah. But
A lot of misses, a lot of misses.
so that's the negative. So the compliment sandwich. Let's get into things that you're excited about for 2024. Is there anything that you're hearing? I mean, we've got camps coming up. You know, they're doing that whole thing again, which I think is great. They'll be able to touch markets. One of the things that was discussed in one of the articles that we had done was that they were thinking of, you know, in January of having the teams practice in their local markets before having mini camps in their local markets to drum up support. So, I mean, what are you looking forward to, or what are some predictions for 2024?
Wow. There's been a lot of discussions about them expanding their reach locally. I even right before we were taping this interview, I got an email from Seattle Sea Dragons. Look like they're doing some local stuff already. They're getting together Seattle programs and all that. So, and then you mentioned mini camps, and that's something we saw in XFL 2020. They're going to need to do that more. Obviously, they're still going to be in the hub. I think that there's obviously going to be a draft. A lot. We're going to see how many
Yeah.
of the
So,
XFL.
is there going to be what's so there is going to be another draft?
Yeah, there is going to be another draft. There will be new players that are brought into the league. I don't know any specific details about that, but any draft or a new pool of players, the majority of them are going to come from, as they always do, NFL cuts in September. So hopefully the draft this year is a little bit earlier than it was last year, because we remember now that last year was kind of like mid-November-ish, late November-ish.
Yeah.
And so, the sooner they can do that, the better. It'll be, people will complain because it'll be during the NFL season.
Oh,
But a large amount of the league's new batch of talented players are going to come from guys who are currently on NFL rosters. Might be XFL guys, who just missed the cut. The XFL players who just signed on NFL teams, whatever. We're at 20 at the moment, I believe. So that we could see a few of those guys cycle back. So I think business as usual from the football end. Now we could see some changes. Now, an interesting comment from Randy Mueller last week, who was interviewed on the Local Defenders podcast, and I think we might have put on an
the
article
recap. Yep.
about that. Yeah, and Mueller said that obviously they've already had talks about year two, but he said, and this is a quote from him, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but this is pretty close to it. He said during this interview that there's already been some changes for XFL teams that haven't been announced publicly yet. Now, whether that's staff changes, whether some assistants are going to be moving on, or whether there's going to be some, because we saw already during the XFL season, some of the coaches demote coaches, fire coaches, all that.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not now the head coaches in the XFL all have 2-year deals, from my understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's a question of, you would assume all 8 are going to be back. You never know. Situation's fluid. There could be some changes to staffs there. So we'll see how the league, how some of these teams handle that. But they're already in the planning stages. They're going to go through showcases. They're going to do their usual. They're going to have the draft. I would assume early fall. I don't know the specifics. Obviously, if you're retaining a lot of players, the XFL is going to be retaining their players for the second year. Initially, their contracts don't run out until after 12/31, December 31st, 2023. Okay. So a lot of these teams, are going to retain, because you got over 400 players in the league. Not all four, the thing is right now with NFL teams, like, I saw the Rock tweet out that, we expect 60 players, XFL players, to be on trying to make NFL teams. Now, maybe that happens because there's a lot of time between now and July when training camp begins. But however, doing my crazy math, there's only 21 NFL roster openings right now in the NFL. 20 XFL players are signed. There's only 21 because the max roster size for NFL teams is 90. Most teams are already at 90. So in order for them to sign an XFL player, they got to cut somebody. And then, some teams are like the Rams are at 84 and Baltimore's, I believe, at 87. So like I said, there are only 21 openings. So even if there are hundreds of players in the XFL that are, obviously worthy of getting another shot in the NFL or going back to the NFL, like Akeem Butler and what have you, there's got to be openings for these players. So right now, as of this moment, even if 21 XFL players were to sign tomorrow, that'd only be 41. There'd be no room for anyone else. So unless people get cut, hurt, whatever. So I know the roster situation is fluid there. So you got my point to bring that all up is that we're going to see a lot of the same players come back because they want to come back.
Yeah.
So but there will be a new wave of players that come in. So like the season ended with teams with that 51 players, and they're likely each team's gonna go back to the training camp size of 75 or 70, and so that's going to bring in a whole new crop of players that are going to be coming in competing to make rosters. So as far as promotion and marketing, that's something that I've heard that the league's going to be trying to do more of in locally, and then that's with mini camps and everything else. But things are pretty vague now in terms of like direct details on how everything is going to be done, dates, that kind of
Yeah. Well, we saw that they were going to take a trip. All the staff was taking a trip somewhere at some point soon, and then cranking things up in June to start talking about players. And you have the staff has been there for a full year. I mean, you have social media people that they're full time, so where they are going to be able to do what they need to do on the off season and build things up for
Year
the
two is
2024.
huge. Year two is huge for the league. It's gonna determine, to be honest with you, whether or not there's a year three. Because I know they're saying all the right things, year three expansion and all that, and that's what we're rooting for, right? We want to see this league last forever. But I think year two is key. They need to make progress, and they sold over 600,000 tickets. They have a multi-year rights deal, $150 million with ESPN with Disney, 5-year deal.
Mhm.
So that's good. Like I mentioned, they sold over 600,000 tickets. So $24 a head. You do the math at home. So that's halfway decent. They had some ad revenue there. They sold some ad revenue there. Budweiser as a sponsor during the XFL Championship game. Wasn't
Yeah.
your usual blend of commercials. So they made some money there. They saved money on travel, but they need to, those things you and I went over, the positives and the negatives. They need to find a way to monetize and create revenue streams. They need to do a better job with these things. So these meetings, they're good. The football group, I have no doubt about the football. The football is going to be good. The quality is going to be good. The coaching is going to be good. The question is, and then you'll see more continuity with these teams. We'll see how many players they lose, and that's a
Yeah.
good byproduct. But you're going to see more continuity with staffs coming back, players coming back their second year in the systems, that kind of stuff. So I'm looking forward to that aspect of it. But it's a question of whether or not this league can create more revenue and can be more profitable. When it comes to like NFL teams, we don't pay attention to this. I don't really, I know the Jets make a lot of money, but I don't think about that,
Yeah.
right? So, so it's like, but when it comes to these leagues, we know that the profitability is important for them to survive. So that's the thing that I tend to focus in on, the ratings, the merchandise, all that. So, the XFL had a lot of positives this year from a business aspect, but they need to build upon what they have started in year one.
Yeah, there'll definitely be a buildup. And it's interesting you say that there's going to be a draft because the USFL did a little college draft, but they didn't do a player draft. And during the offseason, teams were open to sign whoever they wanted, where there wasn't a draft. So I think that's a smart move by the XFL to have a draft because I mean, if there's a draft in November, I am super hyped because I already know what my team is, and I would assume I would know who's coming back. And then I would know you know, what the
What they need to
weaknesses
get.
were and what they need to get. And I would be super hyped to see, oh, I know that guy from the NFL, or he played with the Ravens, or he played with the Steelers, or something like that. And, so, and I've said
Right.
too,
Well, it would be great to add to that. That's a good point that you're mentioning there. It'd be like DC, if they lose Michael Joseph, you could say, wow, they might need a corner. If they lose Abram Smith to say the Rams or somebody, you could say, well, DC could use a running back here in this draft. It would be great if the league actually went out and told you which players are in the pool.
which
So I
they
don't know if
did
they'll
in
do,
2020.
which they did in 2020. Now, if they do that, you got to sign these players to contracts beforehand. Now that's financial and all that, because you don't want to all of a sudden draft a guy and then he goes to another league, he goes to Canada or something like that. So
Yeah.
you want to make sure you got these players locked in. You don't want to celebrate the DC Defenders drafting a running back and then all of a sudden he's not even under contract even before he's in the league. So you'd have to figure out how do you get these guys under contract first with the league and then have them in a draft. You could have so much fun with that.
Oh,
If you
yeah.
do that right way, it doesn't have to be that, it don't have to be that detailed. It'd be nice if it was on an ESPN Plus or something like that. But if you actually tell your fan base, here are the players that are in our pool, and our draft is however many rounds, and here's how we're doing it, that's a fun way to build up towards the beginning of the league. the beginning of the year too.
Now we'll point out that Pat McAfee has signed on with ESPN. Could you imagine his crew doing a XFL draft from their studio and just streaming it on ESPN? That's all you would need to do. And that would get people would be through the roof for something like that. Maybe he'd
That'd
have
be
you
awesome.
on.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I love Pat. It's it's funny because the earning media coverage is very hard for these leagues. I mean, it's not easy. Even though the XFL has ESPN and Disney and all that, a lot of these shows they're not going to talk about these leagues. If they have The Rock on, they'll have him on. They'll talk about some generic stuff, some basics.
Yeah.
Player 54 and all that, but they're not going to break down the defender's offensive line. How's Luis Perez going to deal with Greg Williams' defense? That's not the topic of conversation on the first takes and all that. That's like so far on the back burner. You see the same thing with the USFL. Sometimes it feels like a paid advertisement if Skip Bayless stops for a second to talk about the gamblers.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel natural. But so it's important that the league works on expanding their media coverage, and it'd be nice with little. They kind of missed the boat on some of these things on the way to kickoff in 2023. There wasn't the same anticipation and buzz for the 2023 product as it was for the 2020. And we kind of saw that with the attendance in some areas and the ratings and everything else. So I think the league, they talk about tentpole events, all that. I think they could benefit. One big thing that hopefully is an improvement, and hopefully they get a more clearance on ABC. Have more games on the big network because we saw what a huge factor it was. Because like for the XFL, they were the second highest rated show on ESPN2. They were the second highest rated show on FX for the entire season. A third of their audience is 18 to 49, which is the key demo. So they did a very good job on those things. But when you look at the viewership, they only had 8 games on ABC, and 6 of the league's games went over 1 million viewers. 1 of them was on cable, 5 of them, unsurprisingly enough, were on ABC, including the championship games. So if they had more games on network television, if they had 10, 15, 20, 25 games, their season average ratings would have been much higher. Because they averaged over 1 million viewers, 1.13 million viewers on ABC. So if they had 20 games or 25 or 30 games, their season average ratings would be much higher. So they'd have more ad revenue too. So that's kind of the story there. So I think that's a big thing for year 2. Hopefully they get a little more network clearance. They work on the schedules. They do a better job of scheduling. They experimented a lot. They had some games ended like 3 o'clock in the morning. So they did some strange stuff.
Yes, that schedule stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, they need to figure that out. They need to be a little more fan friendly in terms of when they schedule games for families and all that. Maybe be a little more fan friendly in terms of maybe allowing kids in cheaper or free, that kind of thing. Just do certain things like that, just so you have more families come to your games. You appeal more to the local community. So there's this is a big year coming up for them. I have no doubt about the football. This is a huge, they really need to show improvement in a lot of different areas. They have an off season to do it. They have the lessons from this year that they need to learn from and improve upon year 2. It's a big year coming up. First off season ever for an XFL.
First. And I would say I would sprinkle in too as a negative was the player 54. Loved it, not promoted anywhere. I couldn't even find it. And then it was on every week, and then it was every other week.
And then you forget it exists,
Yeah.
You forget. That's bad. It's like I've had a couple of people reached out to me and says, "Oh man, I caught an episode of Player 54. That's such an awesome show. Why don't they put it on anywhere? Well, did they cancel it? Did they decide that it's not good enough?" So I mean, that's not good. When you have a show like that, you highly tout it, and then you don't. The XFL Today show guys, shout out to them. They did a great job during the week, but you could barely. It was hard, and they gave me a shout out on their show, which was awesome. But they barely
promoted that.
When it was on, what time it was on, how it was going on. Is it going to be Sunday morning? Is it going to be Saturday morning? Those guys, Jason Fitzgerald, Scooby, all those guys, they did a great job, but the XFL didn't do a very good job there of letting you know that they existed. Like we saw that during the season. A lot of casual people didn't know that the XFL was even having a season, or that really their championship games on Saturday. Did they reach that point? I thought their season ended already. So it's like, so there were people like that thought, wow, okay. They were like confused by it because they just didn't. There wasn't the awareness that there needed to be even amongst the people who are actually following the league. So creating that constant like communication with that group. So there's a lot of stuff they need to improve upon for year two.
Yeah, and definitely we were told, that there was nothing better than that first season of the 2020 XFL, where I mean they came out of the gates and everything was big. 3 years later, the world is different, marketing is different, and but definitely lessons learned. And I feel good about going into year two. I think they set the bar. I think so, at some point too, also down here, so that there's definitely room to grow, and that's what corporate nerds want to see is growth. So all right, Mike Mitchell, is there any other things that you want to drop before we put a bow and wrap up the 2023 XFL season? We've been doing this for a long time, 200
Yeah,
plus episodes. How many articles have you written? And we finally actually have finished the season.
yeah, it's pretty awesome to get to this finish line. I lived this back in 2001 with the original XFL. We went through the hardships, the fun of the 2018 period to 2020, and then unfortunately what happened with COVID. So to get to this point is tremendous. I just want to thank all the people out there that visit xflnewshub.com, our sister or brother websites there, cflnewshub.com, usflnewshub.com. It really like, I want to thank you, Mark, because you dedicate a lot of your time, finances, everything else to promote these leagues. You hire a lot of aspiring young professionals and give them opportunities to write about these teams, to cover these teams. Great job, great work that people like Anthony Miller have done. He's getting recognition for it. We see Jay working now within a pro league. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate the people out there that have been patient and have come along for the ride during all this craziness. And it's good that we've reached this point and that we're moving forward, hopefully to more growth and more positive things.
Yeah, and I will say one last thing. The way the XFL needs to market themselves, based on where I was hanging out, and especially in DC, is that, hey, this isn't the NFL. This isn't like we hate each other. I mean, like I was talking to Battlehawks fans, I was talking to Houston Roughnecks fans. I mean, we were all loving it and we were all happy. We were all together. This is not the NFL. The NFL is kind of old man there, you're pissed off league. The XFL is the fun league. And everybody's just there to have a good time. You make your beer snake, you dress up like crazy person, and you enjoy some football. And then you got to, I mean, we're an XFL family. Just that one experience alone, everybody that I know that was there was like, that was so much fun. And it was just people enjoying the game of football, and the XFL provided it. So focus on the fans. And I think the everything will turn out well. So appreciate you, Mike Mitchell, as always, and we'll stay in touch during the off season as well. You did drop the very interesting thing. You said you don't think I noticed, but I heard you say something about Vegas. So we'll see how all that goes.
We'll see how it pans out. We'll see if some of these coaches come back. We'll see. There's no guarantees. The situation's fluid. Like some may find opportunities elsewhere. Some might be shown the exit. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mark.